Yes, I'm aware the NC Hammer crowd has already been broken into the new face, and this isn't even really a new face. This is something that's going to be around very temporarily. But me and Danny were celebrating episode 69 of Otaku's Anonymous a couple of days ago, and in episode 68, Danny had a mustache, and in order to achieve that mustache, Danny had to shave his face. So we thought it would be a funny joke. Actually, I thought it would be a funny joke if we switched positions where we usually sat. But in order to cosplay as Danny from episode 68, I had to shave my beard into a mustache, which means I get to shave away my beard. And as somebody who didn't want to be permanently mustachioed, that means I also had to shave away my mustache. And while initially I hated it, kind of coming around on it. It's been 5 years since I shaved my beard, so I didn't actually know what to anticipate. But I don't know if you guys see this jawline, but I'll take it. This is the youngest I've looked in years. Anyways, now that the flashbang is out of the way, let's break the ice on what we're talking about today. Because if we're being real, some ice does need to be broken. See, a couple of weeks ago, and by a couple of weeks ago, I mean like 12 weeks ago, we made a video on this page called The Survival Guide for Spring 2024 Anime, where I did a somewhat intensive breakdown of all of the Spring 2024 anime that I was excited about. Everything from Date Live 5 to the Hashira training arc. And as I slowly but surely went through all of the anime that we're going to be releasing in the Spring 2024 season, I came to the realization that this was going to be one of the greatest seasons of anime in my recent memory. I mean, how could it not be? Konosuba, MHA, Demon Slayer, and Kaiju number 8 were all coming out at the same time. Tie that into a new season of Slime Isekai and an up-and-comer in the form of Windbreaker, and how could the season be anything else but peak? Well, I don't know how they did it, but they sure figured out how to make it not peak. See, because while my expectations for the season were through the roof, unfortunately, the reality was much closer to the floor. See, while the season has given us some incredible moments, and somewhat wildly, because MHA is only 5 or 6 episodes into their 21 episode run, it might be a little early to make a final call on the Spring 2024 season. When it really comes down to it, this season underdelivered. See, this season was plagued with a lot of the things that regular seasons of anime were plagued with. Antiquated, unnecessary tropes ruining timelines, pacing issues, and above all, weird animation choices. That doesn't mean the season was all bad. In fact, there was a couple of diamonds in the rough that really blew me away. Well, there was one diamond in the rough that blew me away. And thus today I want to go over all the seasonal anime that I watched and talk about how the reality might have differed from my expectations, and give every individual anime of this season a grade, and then give the season overall a grade. So with no further ado, let's get into the Spring 2024 anime breakdown. But before we get to breaking anything down, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you love the idea of me talking about your favorite seasonal anime, then you're gonna love my anime podcast, Otaku's Anonymous, where me and Danny Mata break down everything that happens anime and manga this week. It's available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. So I firmly believe in keeping the best for last. So today I want to talk about the anime from this season, from my least favorite to my most favorite. And then as we go along through this video, I'll remind you of what I thought these anime were gonna pan out to be in terms of my personal enjoyment back when we were talking about them 3 months ago. So coming up in last place, and rather disappointingly, we have GoGo Loser Ranger. Out of all of the anime coming in this season, I was the second most excited about GoGo Loser Ranger. Ironically, the only doubts I had about GoGo Loser Ranger's success was the fact that it was being animated by Yoshi Pictures, who have done almost next to nothing in terms of successful anime projects. I mean, yeah, they made a Zur Lane and Arc Knights, but how many of you know either of those IP? And thus I was a little bit scared that such a cool concept for a show was going to be animated by such a small animation studio. But I figured that this wouldn't be that big of an issue when you consider the fact that people like Bug Films created Zom 100, one of the prettiest anime of the last decade. And what's wild is that I really had no reason to be concerned. In fact, outside of Demon Slayer and maybe Windbreaker, GoGo Loser Ranger was the best looking anime this season. The fight scenes were surprisingly clean, the art style is gorgeous, and the set pieces, the grand world that they would often pan out to, was very well orchestrated. In terms of animation, Yoshi Pictures crushed it. However, I think they might have put too much of their budget into animation. See, because here's the thing. I haven't read the GoGo Loser Ranger manga. I'll lift my hand on that. In fact, I don't even know if there is a GoGo Loser Ranger manga. However, a couple of weeks prior to the beginning of the season, I saw a couple of teaser hype trailers for GoGo Loser Ranger, and I got introduced to the concept of this anime being pitched as The Boys meets Power Rangers. However, in both circumstances, those claims fell very flat. See, GoGo Loser Ranger is a story about a group of monsters who try to invade Earth. However, a group of Earth's protectors, known as the Dragon Keepers, wipe out all the high-level monsters that are controlling all the fighters, and thus immediately the threat of the monsters is eliminated. And now that all of the bosses of the fighters are gone, the fighters are forced into battling against the Dragon Keepers every Sunday for the entertainment of the world. Now, the world doesn't know that this battle is completely staged. Thus, they keep attending it, rooting for the Dragon Keepers to prevail over the monsters week after week. However, the monsters won't stand for this, especially Fighter D, who after one particularly rough battle against the Dragon Keepers decides to stay on Earth as opposed to being teleported back to his giant alien spaceship. And then the story follows D as he tries to take down the Dragon Keepers from the inside. And one of the most nonsensical, worst written stories I've consumed in a long time. See, here's the thing. The animation and the characters involved in this story are really good. Fighter D's motivations are straightforward. The Dragon Keepers are evil, but not nearly as evil as the heroes from The Boys. And there's a couple of other interesting-ish characters that surround them. However, the motivations of all of these characters and why they do what they do is so incredibly hazy and hard to understand that it makes consuming the story in any comprehensible and or enjoyable way almost impossible. There were several times throughout the first 8 or 9 episodes, I believe I dropped after the 8th episode, where I felt like I missed a full episode. Oh, Fighter D's now got an ally in the red-haired guy because the red-haired guy wants to fix the world by helping the monsters win because his family was killed by one of the bosses and he was saved by the blue dragon. It makes no sense. Tie that into the fact that the Dragon Keepers have these sacred artifacts that allow them to completely destroy these monsters, and destroying or stealing the secret artifacts is the #1 key mission of Fighter D, because if humanity doesn't have these secret artifacts, then the fighters don't actually die when cut down, until you realize that mid-tiers in the Dragon Keeper army are allowed to carry clones of these secret artifacts that still completely destroy the fighters. See, what makes The Boys incredible isn't the fact that the superheroes are the bad guys, it's that the characters are well written and their intentions and motivations are incredibly clear. See, Homelander is undoubtedly one of the most villainous and evil individuals I've ever seen in a television show, but there is a streak of humanity that runs through his story that makes him both feared and human. And Power Rangers is awesome because there's morphing and transforming and cool weapons and they're fighting giant kaiju, and thus GoGo Loser Ranger just doesn't deliver on either of the two shows it was actively being compared to, acting more as a watered down version of both of these IPs smashed together in all the wrong places. But enough about GoGo Loser Ranger. Coming up next on my list of disappointments from this season, we have Slime Isekai. Listen, I'm gonna fully come out and say it and identify my bias from the jump here. I dropped after the 3rd episode of season 3 because over the course of those 3 episodes, I have never, and I mean never, been as bored watching anime as I was in that moment. The first 3 episodes of the season were like watching paint dry. And quite honestly, that gave me a conniption. See, because for all intents and purposes, I adore the first 2 seasons of Slime Isekai. On top of that, I also adore world building, and that's exactly what they were trying to do in these first 3 episodes of Slime Isekai. So why did I drop? This season had mediocre writing, and I mean like fully mediocre. Oh, Nick, what do you mean? Everybody's intentions were clear. We were establishing relations between countries and building up political systems. Yeah, you're right. The intentions and movements of everybody in the universe were clear, but that doesn't mean the writing was good. See, this season of Slime Isekai plays out more like an audiobook than an anime. I get the season 2 ended with a massive battle that had massive political repercussions all across the world. Not to mention, Rimuru became a demon lord, which also meant obviously we're gonna have to see how the world reacted to that news. But the beauty of a visual medium is that you have the ability to show while telling. And this season simply didn't do that. This season was so dedicated to world building and showing everybody's reaction to this brand new political breakthroughs that, to me at least, they forgot all the aspects of the story that actually made it good. See, ironically, just telling me how the world is reacting to news is the laziest way to get that information across. If you're just gonna give me 12 dudes sitting around a table talking about what's going on with Rimuru and the Nation of Beasts, then that's technically no different from me reading this conversation in a book. The beauty beauty of having a visual aid, or just being good at writing, is that you can play out how these political waves are rippling through the entire Earth through events. Have a political uprising that leads to a civil war in the country that Rimuru just defeated. The church country, I'm forgetting its name. Show the nobles ousting the king as the king's royal guards try to protect him against the nobles trying to get their pound of flesh to give to Rimuru. Don't just give me an Excel sheet breakdown that takes 12 minutes on the relationships of these nobles that I didn't know existed until 12 minutes ago. And genuinely, that's the issue with this season. It's written lazily and therefore it lacks all intrigue. And hey, maybe the second half of the season was incredible, but I'd rather chew chalk than try and watch the 4th episode. So let's move on. Now, from here on out, the anime that we're going to be talking about aren't necessarily disappointments. However, they didn't hit my very high expectations. And I would say that of all the shows that came out this season that didn't hit my expectations, the lowest on that list would probably be Demon Slayer. But that's not necessarily Demon Slayer's fault. See, the Hashira training arc, at least in the anime, is in a really weird spot. Mostly because it wasn't entirely clear what Ufotable was going to be doing with the Hashira training arc. See, Demon Slayer didn't come out until 5 weeks into the season. And thus I thought, oh, that's probably because the Hashira training arc is only 9 chapters in the manga, which means they'll probably do 2 or 3 episodes focused on the Hashira training arc and then give us the beginning of the Infinity Castle arc. But that's not the case. In actuality, the real reason they didn't release this season until 5 weeks into the season is because they were going to extend those 9 chapters of the Hashira training arc into 8 episodes, which is One Piece pacing. Now, the Hashira training arc itself hasn't been bad. However, I do think you're fully tripping if you say that this isn't the worst season of Demon Slayer. And that's kind of why the Hashira training arc was only 9 chapters in the manga. The mangaka simply wanted to orchestrate the fact that the Demon Slayer Corp was trying to get stronger, in that they were doing that by training with the Hashira. And displaying that message to the fans doesn't take that much time, just about 9 chapters. Roughly 1 chapter to every single Hashira the Tanjiro pops on over to. And yet Ufotable decided that the Hashira training arc should be longer, that we should get more time with each and every single one of these Hashira so that we can get to know them more as characters, and so the message that the Demon Slayer Corps is trying to get stronger hits home harder. And while I don't think that was necessary, I do think Ufotable's hand was forced a little bit. See, one of the biggest complaints revolving around Demon Slayer as a manga is that we don't get time with a lot of the Hashira until the Infinity Castle arc, and by then, the story's almost over. And thus the Hashira training arc kind of serves as a way to introduce us to the Hashira prior to the Infinity Castle arc. And thus a lot of manga readers complained that we want more time with the Hashira, and that's kind of what Ufotable is giving us. Except, not really. See, the Hashira that we haven't spent time with, that haven't joined Tanjiro in a battle against upper-ranked demons, are Shinobu, Tsunemi, and Iguro, and Gyome. Yet Tsunemi, while he does play a biggish part in the first episode of this season, is kind of skipped over in his own episode, episode 5, to focus on Iguro. On top of that, Gyome is barely present in episode 6. Instead, we're more focusing on how Zenitsu, Inosuke, and Tanjiro are dealing with the Hashira training than the Hashira themselves. And ironically, the best look we've had into Hashira during this arc was from Moishiro Tokido, who we had a huge amount of time with last season, Giyu, who's kind of always been around, and Tengen, who's basically the star of the Entertainment District arc. And thus, while we've slowed down the pacing and introduced filler content, I can't help but feel like about 50% of the time, it feels like exactly that, filler content. With episode 6, I believe, being the best example of this, as the entirety of episode 6 kind of feels like a jujitsu scroll, like some kind of comedic B-roll that happens in the last 30 seconds of an episode to promo the next episode. And while we do introduce concepts like repetitive action, and Genya's there and he's my favorite character, so I can't complain, I can't help but feel like after a season that was critically panned like Swordsmith Village arc, extending the Hashira training arc to 8 episodes was just not a smart play. And while it's Demon Slayer and I adore the characters, so I would literally watch them watch paint dry, I just had higher hopes for this season. I just realized I haven't been giving anything grades. GoGo Loser Ranger gets a C-, Slime Isekai gets a C, and Demon Slayer, as it stands currently 6 episodes in, gets a B-. I mean, it's Demon Slayer. It looks gorgeous, the characters are awesome, it's funny, and I get that the next season's gonna hurt my feelings. I've read the manga, I don't know why everyone's acting like I don't know what's coming, but regardless of how it hurts my feelings, I'd like to be in the Infinity Castle arc by now. But maybe being in your final arc isn't all it's cracked up to be, because next up on our list is MHA. Listen, maybe my hopes being high for MHA was a mistake. See, because here's the thing. All of the evidence of the last 2 seasons is pointed at the fact that this last season wasn't going to necessarily be anything special. What do I mean by that? Nick, you're very outspoken about how much you love MHA. Why is this season not going to be anything special? Well, I can surmise that answer for you in one word and one word only: Bones. Listen, there has never been an anime in existence that has been so impaired by the fact that its movies look incredible. I mean, actually, go watch any My Hero Academia movie. There will be like 4 or 5 moments in it where you're like, oh my god, that's the prettiest animated thing I've ever seen in my entire life. And what's wild is that occasionally this level of animation does peek through in My Hero Academia's anime. Either running across the mud or ice, I don't remember which one it was, in the Class 1A versus 1B battles. Shoto's flash fire attack in the sporting event arc. I don't remember what it was called. Sports day? They're tuning exams. My Hero Academia's tuning exams. The entirety of Deku's battle against Overhaul. Moments of absolutely riveting and gorgeous animation that do how incredibly beautiful My Hero Academia's manga is justice. And yet here we are, 7 episodes into My Hero Academia's 7th season, and everything outside of the Stars and Stripes fight, which still wasn't even all that great in terms of animation, but it's also notably my least favorite fight in the entire manga, so also in terms of plot. And nothing outside of obviously Stars and Stripes grabbing a bunch of lasers and driving them into Shigaraki's chest has looked all that great. Now, this isn't the end of the world. The war arc of MHA is very good, and just seeing this all hit the silver screen and being acted out with music and voice acting is gonna be a pleasure. And that's why My Hero isn't at the bottom of this list. But for some reason, and honestly, maybe it's not even Bones' fault, Bones just appears to have taken their foot off the gas with MHA. And I genuinely believe there's no better way to emphasize this point than by looking at the anime adaptation of Shoto and Dabi's face-off with All Might's statue in the background. One of the most important moments in the manga, drawn absolutely gorgeously by Horikoshi, and yet Bones adapted it in the most bleached, whitewashed, least shaded way I've ever seen. And while that might seem nitpicky and over the top, this is My Hero Academia we're talking about. One of the biggest manga and anime IP of the last decade, heading into its final, well, I guess not final anymore, arc, where we're going to see 300 to 400 chapters of character development finally come to a head in terms of key, crucial battles. If there is one season that should be animated to the top of Bones' abilities, it should be this one. And yet, visually, it's just unimpressive. And like I said, that may not even be Bones' fault. See, My Hero Academia has been around for a decade now. And over the course of that decade-long run, unfortunately, there's been a lot of huge IP around MHA that just look more impressive than MHA. See, because over the course of MHA's tenured run, shows like JJK, Chainsaw Man, Bleach's TYBW arc, and so many other massive anime IP came out and looked better than MHA. And while animation is not everything in anime, some of the greatest anime projects ever completed do not have good animation. But then again, a lot of those projects aren't massive shonen IP that are trying to build out a war arc. And thus, because the war arc is one of my favorite arcs in all of MHA, I guess I just kind of assumed that maybe Bones felt the same way. And I figured because they were releasing MHA a couple of weeks late into the season that maybe they were taking extra time to make sure that this season looked incredible. And yet the only thing that's really gotten any attention to detail thus far animation-wise has been the Stars and Stripe fight, which is the most useless fight in the entirety of the manga. So it's just a shame to see that Stars and Stripes got more attention to detail than Dabi versus Shoto. I just want what's best for MHA, and I feel like Bones isn't giving the fans that. But we're still far away from the end of this arc, though we are coming to the end of the season, so maybe I'll be proven wrong. But what we've seen thus far is a solid B. At the very least, it's MHA. After MHA, I have some conflict in my soul, because while I know what my favorite anime of this season is, there is a solid toss-up between 2nd and 3rd place. But unfortunately, not because of level of enjoyment. Yeah, I know I enjoy one of these anime more than I enjoy the other one, at least currently. But one of these anime, they used an antiquated trope that made me uncomfortable. Whatever, let's talk about it, I guess. Because coming up next, we have Konosuba's 3rd season. Pretty much everything about this anime is problematic and filled with antiquated tropes. I mean, it's an isekai story about a NEET getting transported to a fantasy world where he has a sadist tank, a lolly mage, and a dumb goddess who doesn't wear a skirt long enough to cover her tailbone. Pretty much everything about this anime is problematic and filled with antiquated tropes. And yet, it's my favorite isekai on Earth. Why? Well, because, yes, is Kazuma's traveling party filled with all the things that women shouldn't be in anime? Absolutely. Is there multiple times that Kazuma either creeps on women while they're bathing or makes moves on them while they're asleep? Absolutely. But the beauty, the true actual beauty of Konosuba is that it plays by the rules of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. See, Kazuma is our MC. but we're not really supposed to like him. He's a scumbag. He's a really bad person, and he gets treated accordingly. And that's the real beauty of Konosuba. Every time Kazuma does something creepy or wrong, he immediately gets punished for it. Anytime anything's going really well for Kazuma, it's immediately stripped away from him. Kazuma is not supposed to be your idol, and that's why I think it's okay for them to do what they do in Konosuba. Kazuma does everything your standard MC protagonist would do, but he gets treated like the scumbag he is because he does it. And that's fine until you include children. See, because I knew this season was going to be doing a bit of a tightrope walk. When I saw the teaser trailer was Kazuma trying to get very clearly a young girl to call him elder brother. Well, I guess he was actually more aiming to be called big bro, but ended up on elder brother. And while the first couple of episodes, this tight walk went pretty well for Konosuba, as while Kazuma wanting this 9 to 10-year-old girl to call him big bro wasn't my favorite trope, it's not the end of the world, so long as it's not sexualized in any way, and it didn't appear to be so. On top of that, Kazuma achieves the goal and then immediately fumbles it and is punished for being so weird about it in the first place. So once again, always sunny rules. Eventually, Kazuma gets his hand on Iris's necklace. Iris is the princess who Kazuma wants to be called Big Bro by. And after reading the inscription on Iris's necklace, Kazuma and Iris swap bodies, which is fine for a moment, until eventually Kazuma decides that in this child's body, he's gonna creep on Darkness in the bath, while also inviting the princess's bodyguard, who is a well-endowed, very attractive blonde woman, much over the age of 18, into the bath as well, so that he can wash her back. And the bodyguard just gets way too excited about this. And then we eventually get to the bath where Darkness, the bodyguard, and now Iris are all standing naked. And it's at this moment that Iris and Kazuma switch back, which once again is Kazuma being punished for being weird, and thus the consequences of his actions become apparent immediately, and he's punished accordingly. I really wish we could have done all of this without stripping down the very clearly child. Now, you don't see anything, but no. Now, because Kazuma is treated like the scumbag that he is for doing all of this, I can't fault it all that much, because the clear take-home message from all of this is don't be like this, but I can still be uncomfortable with it. Now, the rest of the season, which is still coming out, I think they're only doing 11 episodes and they're on the 10th right now, is really good. It's classic Konosuba nonsense. It's funny, the action is surprisingly good, Kazuma has to get revived a bunch, and thus, for the moment, I guess things are fine. But I don't know, if people decided to drop the show because of what they did with Iris, I genuinely couldn't blame them. And before the Mushoku Tensei people jump on me and be like, oh, you're making an excuse for Konosuba, no, I'm actually not. But the key difference between Rudius Grey Rat and Kazuma is that no Konosuba fan is gonna defend Kazuma. And if you do defend Kazuma, you need to take a deep look inwards. To keep bringing it back to Always Sunny here, that's like watching It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia and being like, wow, Charlie Day, that's the life I want to live. Or like being like, wow, Dennis is such an emotionally stable, well-adapted human being. Those aren't the conclusions a rational consumer would come to, because the show is dedicated to showing us that those people are bad people and they should be treated accordingly. Rudy marries the cousin he assaults. That's not being punished. That's being rewarded. He also marries the elf he grooms, and the mage that groomed him, who didn't technically groom him because he was still older than her in reincarnation years. So Konosuba, B for the season. Next up on our list, in second place, we have what many people are talking about as their favorite anime of the season, Kaiju number 8. And if Kaiju number 8 is your favorite anime of the season, genuinely, I cannot blame you. It is a very fun watch. The animation on the battles is great. Every single character in Kaiju number 8 is incredible, but specifically Hoshina, who's just Levi, but that's why everybody loves him. The protagonist trio of Kafka, Reno, and Kikoro have an incredible dynamic, and it's only gonna get better. About a 32-year-old crushing on a 28-year-old. What more could we ask for? The dub is coming out at the same time as the sub, and the humor delivers in a huge way. In fact, the humor delivers in such a huge way that I'm watching this with Dorothy. Yeah, it's the first shonen anime we've ever watched together. She loves it. Her only complaint is that the episodes are too short, and I tend to agree. However, if I was to have a gripe with Kaiju number 8, I'd have two. And the first gripe is barely a gripe because there's really nothing that production IG could have done about it. But to circle back to the idea of the episodes being longer, for the first 7 or 8 episodes, it did feel as though we'd get about 1 to 2 minutes of action in the beginning of an episode that'd either be cleanup of the last episode or introduction to new content. Then we'd get about 16 minutes of setup, and then we get another 2-ish minutes of action at the end, which would then be cleaned up in the first 2 minutes of the next episode. But that kind of thing is bound to happen when you're setting up a universe. But if I was to make a suggestion, I'd say make the first episode 45 minutes and try to chug through as much of the training and introductions as you can. Outside of that, I've been incredibly vocal on the second point. I don't like how their faces look. Everybody just kind of looks like a Fortnite skin. Like, have you ever seen Naruto or Hinata's Fortnite skins? They just look kind of off. It's uncanny valley. The manga for Kaiju number 8 is very well drawn, and the shading is on point. But for some reason, Production IG decided to make everybody's faces not only rounder, but also less shaded, which makes everybody kind of look like a me. Now, I've slowly but surely been Stockholm Syndromed into accepting it, mostly because all of the other animation and all other aspects of the story is incredible, but there's just a couple of aspects I wish were a little better. But overall, like I said, if Kaiju number 8 is your favorite anime of the season, I couldn't blame you. It gets a solid A- from me. But Nick, if Kaiju number 8 is your favorite anime of the season, what gets that A ranking? And I'll tell you, it's the Misfit at Demon King Academy 2 Part 2. Now, it's Windbreaker. I've been very vocal about how much I've loved it. And listen, while I did technically bring up in my Spring 2024 Survival Guide video that I said that Windbreaker was gonna be the best anime of this season, we don't need to bring up all that. I mean, sure, I did, of course, identify the fact that there was a Tokyo Revengers-sized hole in the heart of the anime fandom, because while Tokyo Revengers was one of the most popular anime when it came out, it fell off harder than... I was gonna say something pop culture related, and then I realized I don't know pop culture. Jinxie? I've seen some people saying he's fallen off. Tokyo Ghoul. We're gonna stick with anime, because while Windbreaker could have just been another delinquent anime, it is literally anything but that. See, not only did Cloverworks go ridiculously hard with the animation of this project, the voice acting cast of the subcast, that's what I'm watching, are going arguably crazy. Don't even get me started on the fact that Umamiya, the head of Bofurin, is Gojo. Sakura Hakura, I know that's not how you say it, that's how I say it, is Inosuke. And the line delivery from both of them not only reminds you of the two characters I've already referenced, but is also as good, if not better than they are in their own bigger anime IPs. Tie this into the fact that the characters in this universe are hilarious, relatable, and kind of ironically like the other characters their voice actors have acted. And watching Windbreakers feels like a delinquent anime about some of your favorite characters in anime. Umamiya, the white-haired, tall, good at everything head of Bofurin High, is Gojo as a delinquent. Sakura Hakura and his proclivity to headbutt or kick anybody who gets in his way is basically Inosuke. Suo, the eye patch kid, is just Tanjiro with an eye patch, and he's awesome. Nirei is Zenitsu, and Toma is Kisame. He's not actually Kisame, he just has shark teeth. And outside of the incredible character dynamics, the fantastic choreography and animation, and the stacked voice acting cast, there is a began and completed power tournament in the first season. And every single one of the fights is not only incredibly hype, but also drives home key messaging about all of the characters involved, which is the epitome of showing and not telling. And now that the power tournament arc is done, we're getting introduced to the class that Sakura Hakura is going to be in, which is filled with some of my favorite character designs I've seen in recent years. And thus now, after the completion of a power tournament in the first 10 episodes of the show, we're getting introduced to the possibility of having a class 1A filled with delinquents. Tie that into the fact that these boys, gay as hell, I don't care what anybody says, and you have the legitimate makings of what I believe will be the greatest delinquent anime ever created. Unless, of course, you count Yu Yu Hakusho as a delinquent anime, in which case, the second greatest delinquent anime ever created. And thus, for me, this season of Windbreaker gets a big old A. Not an A+, though. After Choji is defeated by Umamiya, that episode does drag a little bit, but everything else about this season has been perfect. And thus, to me, it is the anime of the season. Unless, of course, you're counting Dungeon Meshi, in which case Dungeon Meshi is the anime of the season. But Dungeon Meshi started in winter 2024, so I don't consider it a spring 2024 anime. But if I were to consider it a spring 2024 anime, it gets an A+. It's the perfect anime. Why aren't you watching it? It's so fun. It makes you feel good. You learn things about yourself. You want to eat. You want to sleep. It's the Japanese government gaslighting you into taking care of yourself. Not to mention, it's animated by Studio Trigger, so it's gorgeous. And also, gay as hell. Only straight person in that party is Chilchuck, and you can't convince me otherwise. Oh, Laios likes girls. Laios is asexual. Don't even. But yeah, that's our spring 2024 anime rundown. I'm curious to hear from you guys. What anime this season blew you out of the water, and which let you down? Tell me in the comments below, and while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. I was mean to a lot of big anime fan bases, so I'm probably gonna stay away from the comments. Sensitive.